Welcome to the Teacher Work Sample set of tutorial videos. The purpose of these videos is to orient you to what the Teacher Work Sample is all about and to give you instruction about how to complete and submit the Teacher Work Sample through LiveText. You'll find that this is a fairly short video, as are most of them. Somewhere around 10 to 15 minutes would be the average. This one will be quite a bit shorter. And you'll want to sit down. You will want to take some notes on these things, although there is going to be plenty of opportunity for you to go back. You can repeat these as many times as you want. However, this may be the only time you want to hear it. So, the Teacher Work Sample came about as a result of the National Commission on Teaching and America's Futures report in 1996, and they recommended that by 10 years from the publication of their report, that we should have teachers who are competent, caring, and knowledgeable in every single classroom in America. Not a bad goal. There were some things that they were hoping to increase. One of those things was teacher effectiveness. And teacher effectiveness is not just the idea that you can hold down a classroom or that you can control via classroom management techniques and such, but that the students actually learn and that there is a new attitude, a new view about what learning really is and what the student in particular is supposed to accomplish as a student. They're not just supposed to be sponges anymore. They are supposed to be learners, and they are supposed to be able to take some responsibility for that learning. So the idea of teacher effectiveness, if you look at the literature over a period of probably 30 or 40 years, you'll see that it has become sort of a reflection of the view of curriculum and the view of schooling and the roles of teacher and learner. We are now trying to get teachers who have the ability to integrate curriculum, instruction, and assessment. Those are the three big pieces. Those are the things that we do in the classroom. But the idea is that we'll foster learning outcomes that are desired in classroom students, and those are different now than they used to be. The learning outcomes used to be that they would just do well on tests. Now we would like for them to be learners. So, the purpose of this teacher work sample process is to sort of reorient the mindset of a teacher, or to reinforce maybe the mindset of a teacher toward the idea that teachers need to know who the students are. They need to take stock of all of the things that are available to them, both for curriculum, instruction, assessment, and the capital that comes to them in the form of a student. They need to take into consideration all of those aspects, combine those, and out of that, they have to create an approach to their classroom that is effective. And it's a different kind of an approach than most people typically find themselves in. Either those people who are pre-service teachers who got into teaching because they really enjoyed having or playing school in their basement, or they really like kids, or teachers who have been in the classroom for 25 or 30 or 35 years and who have become very set in their ways. So the idea of this is to sort of open the eyes of the teaching population. And you'll find that this process does a pretty good job with that. The second thing we're looking at here is to assure the effectiveness of teachers as facilitators of learning. And the last point you see here on this slide is an interesting one. You may or may not be aware of the work of a guy named Robert Stedman, who in 1987, and actually through 1989, wrote a few kind of scathing reports about the state of teaching, and he called education a craft rather than a profession. And he said that for a variety of reasons. Some of those reasons had to do with the fact that as teachers, we tend to be creatures of habit more than creatures who are driven by the results of research that we find around us and that we do in our classrooms. And if you're interested, you can go back and look him up. It's Robert Stedman. But his work really raised the idea that teachers need to be very intentional about what they do. And if they are that way, then there is a better likelihood that they can contribute to the professionalization of the whole, what we would call a profession, but what he at the time was calling a craft. The ideas that you will be going through with the Teacher Work Sample are these 7. You will look at your classroom's contextual factors. That is all of the things that surround your classroom, including the community where it exists, the kinds of facilities that are available, the number of students, the kinds of students, what their gifts and limitations are. Then you'll look at your curriculum, and you'll decide on pertinent learning goals. This is a sort of a microcosmic look. You will only do 5 lessons, and you may have as few as 2 or 3 learning goals that will drive those lessons. It depends, and when you look at that presentation, you'll see what I'm talking about. Notice that the next thing that you do in this process, after you've identified what the curriculum is you're going to talk about, the next thing is you're going to develop an assessment plan, including a pre- and post-test that is going to let you see what the students know about what you want to teach before you begin to teach them, and you'll be able to gather data and compare that information with what the students know at the end of your instruction. Then, after you've decided what the appropriate outcomes are going to be, that is, via your assessment plan, you will design the instruction. That's the lesson planning part. And as we know, when we plan a lesson, we have all kinds of wonderful ideas, and we get into the classroom, and it's not long before something changes. The bell rings, an announcement comes over the loudspeaker, somebody enters the classroom, a guest speaker shows up on the wrong day, whatever. But we have instructional decision-making that happens constantly, and you'll be asked to sort of keep a log, keep a record of those instructional decisions and why they were made, how that affected your instruction, and how you responded to do all of that. Then there is the data gathering and analysis section called the analysis of student learning, and the reflection and self-evaluation section, which is rather self-explanatory, although there will be a tutorial to talk about that. So here are a few pieces of advice. First, there are rubrics that go with every single step of this process. And the entire rubric is available to you as a Word document in the same area where you found this tutorial, this set of tutorials. Follow the critical elements within the rubric, because it really is what you're going to be evaluated on. And more importantly than that, it really is what the bits and pieces of good teaching include. Second, don't forget to include tables and charts when they're required. You'll be told what kinds of tables to include, what kinds of charts, where they're required, perhaps what they ought to look like. Don't leave them out. If you are not familiar with Microsoft Excel, That is the PC program that you'll be using. It's basically a spreadsheet program, but from that you can create the tables and charts that are necessary. There are other programs. We're not trying to sell any one particular software here. Anything that works is fine. Next, when you write these, remember that the first 5 elements are actually written in the past tense. And the last 2 elements are written in the present tense. The final piece of advice is that as soon as you are assigned the teacher work sample, begin it. As soon as you know what class you're going to work with, begin to gather information about that class. The contextual factors piece of this teacher work sample is extremely important, and that's where you can begin. You can get much of the information about the school and about the community where it exists without ever entering the building itself. There will be other recommendations and suggestions specifically about each of the sections and how you can do that. But the point is, begin immediately. This is not something that can be done at the last minute. It cannot be done well at the last minute, and it very well may not be able to be done at all at the last minute. So begin immediately. Start moving through at a good pace.